There are races you never forget.
And there's Lewis Hamilton slewing into the wall, and oh dear, Romain Grosjean and Fernando Alonso and Lewis Hamilton all coming to grief at La Source.
Not because of glory, not because of brilliance, but because they go so catastrophically wrong, you wonder how on earth one driver ever recovered from it, or was even allowed back in a Formula One car. This is the story of a race so terrifying, so careless, so dangerous, it should have ended one driver's career on the spot. Today, we're going to tell you how one split-second mistake turned a Formula One race into a demolition derby, nearly decapitated one of the most talented drivers on the grid, and left an entire paddock asking, should Romain Grosjean ever race again? Strap in, because this is the 2012 Belgian Grand Prix, the kind of nightmare that gives every team boss cold sweats, all captured in brutal, crystal-clear HD. Because in just 5 seconds, this man managed to destroy 4 cars, wipe out a championship contender, and almost spark the most fatal crash F1 had seen since Ayrton Senna. So, if you think today's racing is boring, let me remind you, it only takes one driver, 1 inch of bad judgment, and 1 second of chaos to put the entire sport at risk. By the end of this video, you will never look at the start of an F1 race the same way again. Let's set the stage. It's Spa, legendary, fast, unforgiving. The place that gives you eau rouge, radiant, blanchiment, corners so quick they turn even seasoned veterans into wide-eyed rookies. Spa isn't just another racetrack. This place has witnessed some of the most shocking moments in F1 history. Remember the 1998 pileup, when half the field crashed in the spray at turn 1, and David Coulthard nearly got his head chopped off by a flying wheel? Or the horrifying 2001 crash that saw Luciano Burti's car launch straight into the barriers at 300 km/h. Spa punishes even the tiniest mistakes, and it does it spectacularly. It's August 2012. Championship tension was sky high. Fernando Alonso, the wily Spaniard, was leading the standings with a Ferrari that had no business leading anything. Lewis Hamilton, still a McLaren driver, was desperate to claw back points. Kimi Raikkonen was being, well, classic Kimi. No words, just raw speed. But on that grid stood one man in a black and gold Lotus who had been raising eyebrows all season for the wrong reasons. Romain Grosjean. Grosjean was fast, nobody doubted that. But he had a growing reputation for one thing: terrible spatial awareness. He'd already tangled with half the field at least once. At Monaco, he tried to send one up the inside and took out multiple cars. At Silverstone, he almost took out the front runners right off the line, but Spa was about to put the final stamp on that messy reputation in the most horrifying way. The lights went out and everyone surged toward La Source, the tight first hairpin that acts like a funnel for 20 angry wide Formula One cars. Grosjean, starting from P8, made a brilliant launch. He saw a gap to his right and, in classic Romain style, lunged for it with zero hesitation. Except, he never accounted for the fact that Lewis Hamilton was already there. With nowhere to go, Hamilton got pinched, their wheels touched. And then physics took over in the worst way possible. Grosjean's Lotus launched up onto Hamilton's McLaren, both of them skating directly across the track, straight into the path of Fernando Alonso, who had absolutely no chance to react. The crash was apocalyptic. Grosjean's car flew terrifyingly close over the front of Alonso's Ferrari, just inches from hitting his helmet. A few more inches, and Fernando's head would have been obliterated. That was the day the FIA realized a closed cockpit might not be the worst idea ever. You're probably thinking, just how bad was it really? Well, stick around, because next we'll dive into how insanely lucky Alonso was to walk away, and why this moment ended up changing F1 for good. When the carbon stopped flying, the marshals stood in absolute disbelief. Lewis Hamilton, out. Fernando Alonso, out. Sergio Perez, out. Kamui Kobayashi, damaged. Basically a passenger. All of them eliminated by Grosjean's single dive bomb gone wrong. Alonso climbed out of the Ferrari, visibly shaken. When they showed him the replay, the moment Grosjean's car literally skidded over his helmet's visor, the Spaniard's eyes went cold. He knew he'd been millimeters from death. That image would become Exhibit A when the FIA debated adding the halo system years later. And if you think I'm exaggerating, listen to these radio messages from the drivers in the chaos. Alonso, is he crazy? I cannot believe. He fly over me. Hamilton, what the hell was that guy doing? Grosjean, I don't know what happened, guys. That summed up the mood perfectly. Complete confusion, followed by absolute rage. Marshals were picking carbon fiber out of the grass for days, and fans on social media exploded, demanding, ban him, enough is enough. For Alonso, it was nothing short of a miracle. To walk away from a near decapitation, that's why we call Spa both thrilling and terrifying. Often in the same heartbeat, the stewards did not wait around. They slapped Grosjean with a one-race ban, the first driver to receive that punishment since Mika Häkkinen in 1994. A ban in modern F1 is basically the equivalent of being told, they cannot be trusted to drive. That was F1's way of screaming, "You almost killed a world champion." Fans were furious. Commentators called him a weapon. Even his own team couldn't defend him anymore. A one-race ban sounds small, but in Formula One, it is a nuclear penalty. It screams that you are dangerous, reckless, unprofessional, and maybe shouldn't even have a seat. And honestly, you can't really blame people for being fed up. Spa was just the culmination. Earlier that year in Monaco, Grosjean clattered into Michael Schumacher at turn 1. Silverstone forced 2 cars off the track on lap 1. It was a pattern of absolute chaos. Spa was simply the final straw. Many people genuinely expected Lotus to sack Grosjean on the spot. Sponsors were spooked, and Romain's entire F1 career, which had barely gotten off the ground, was one misjudged move away from being over. But somehow, against every bit of common sense, Lotus kept him on. Now, imagine what it feels like to be branded the most dangerous driver on the grid. That was Grosjean in 2012. Every move he made after Spa was analyzed under a microscope, every overtake judged for recklessness. Every close call met with a collective paddock wince. Romain's confidence took a hit. He admitted later that he was terrified he'd be out of the sport if he messed up again. He spent the rest of that season, and honestly, most of 2013, rebuilding trust, one clean race at a time. He had to fight the label of first lap nutcase basically every weekend, and it was painful. There's nothing worse for a driver than being known as the guy who ruins everyone's races. Yet Romain had the guts to come back. He figured out how to give other drivers enough space, read gaps better, and think ahead instead of just reacting in the moment. And by 2013, he was racing at a genuinely elite level, scoring podiums, battling Vettel, and keeping it clean. That transformation was brutal, but necessary. Still, the scar from Spa would stick to his name for the rest of his career. Fans and journalists never fully forgot it, no matter how many points he scored. But if you think this was Romain's only terrifying moment, oh no, wait till we get to Bahrain 2020, because that made Spa look like a paper cut. You might wonder, did anything good actually come from this mess? Yes, because after Spa 2012, the conversation about driver head protection, which had been stuck in committee meetings for a decade, finally reached a breaking point. The FIA said never again. That day convinced them a halo device, or some other cockpit protection, had to become reality. And 5 years later, in 2018, the halo was officially introduced. So, in a twisted way, Grosjean's moment of madness, the crash that nearly killed a champion, actually saved countless drivers down the line. And of course, Romain would be the first to thank the halo when his car exploded in Bahrain in 2020 and the device saved his life. Barely into lap 1, he clipped Kvyat's wheel, speared straight into the guardrail at 220 km/h, split the Haas in half, and triggered a Hollywood-grade fireball. For 28 agonizing seconds, Grosjean was literally trapped inside an inferno. But the halo held the barrier back, keeping the cockpit intact and giving him just enough survival space to escape. Burns on his hands. Brutal. But walking away from a 67 gigaton impact, that's a miracle, and he himself put it best. The halo saved my life. If Spa 2012 hadn't happened, maybe the halo debate would have stalled again. Maybe Bahrain would have ended with a far darker headline. That's the thing about racing. Sometimes a horrifying near tragedy is what forces people to change. So here's the question. Could a race like Spa 2012 happen again? In one word, yes. Even with today's safety, even with the halo, even with better rules, a first lap funnel with 20 drivers all desperate to gain 5 places before turn 1. Yeah, it's still a grenade waiting to go off. Modern F1 is safer, but human error, that's never going away. And the first lap, with cold tires, cold brakes, and a driver's championship dreams on the line, that is still the single most dangerous moment of any race. Think of Mugello in 2020, where drivers plowed into each other on a safety car restart. Think of Silverstone 2022, when Joe's car flipped into the catch fencing upside down. Spa itself in 2019 took Antoine Hubert from us, a painful reminder that racing will never be 100% safe. No amount of engineering genius can fix a hot-headed move by a driver under pressure. And that's why we keep telling these stories, so nobody forgets how close we came to disaster. So nobody forgets that split-second choices can change lives forever. So, was Spa 2012 the race that should have ended Grosjean's career? Maybe. Some would say yes, that he was too reckless, too dangerous, and that the ban wasn't enough. But others argue it taught him the hardest lesson an F1 driver can learn, and that second chances can change people for the better. What do you think? Should Grosjean have been fired after Spa? Drop your answer in the comments and don't hold back. I want to see what side you're on. And while you're here, hit subscribe. We've got more high-octane content coming your way that you won't want to miss. Until then, keep the throttle pinned. And remember, racing will always be dangerous, no matter how safe they try to make it.